Welcome back to the Align Life podcast. It's me, Rachel Freeman, and I'm joined with my co-host, Dr. Devin Shea. And today on the podcast, we have the lovely Ellie Shortt. I met Ellie a couple weeks ago at the Nutritional Therapy Association, and we instantly clicked. I just loved her positivity, her mindset, her vibe, everything about her, and I know that you will too. Ellie is a nutritional therapy practitioner. She's a former journalist, I believe, a chef, and the founder of the blog Whole Happy. She has a love of food, eating, and nourishing the mind, body, and soul, which you can see radiating through her posts over on social media.
Yeah.
Once you see those are like amazing photos.
Yeah,
killing it. Drool worthy. Love them. So you guys should check it out. Her ultimate goal of her practice is to allow her clients to feel whole again and to achieve happiness from the inside out. Love that. So welcome to the show, Ellie. So happy to have you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Ellie, I'm fired up to have you on the show. Thanks for coming out. And we're speaking to you from Canada. Is that correct?
That's right. I live on an island off the west coast of Canada. It's a big island.
I was about to say that's a huge island. For all of our Americans who don't know anything about Canada, there is a place called Victoria, British Columbia, and it's above where we live. And this is where Ellie is speaking to us from. Ellie, talk to me a little bit about your journey. I was curious. I saw and I've heard that you have some interest and some background in education in the chef space, like French cuisine, and then you made the transition into being a healthcare practitioner and speaking on panels and all sorts of stuff. So tell us how you came by this journey.
Absolutely. It may seem a little disjointed, but when I look back, it all makes so much sense. I originally went into journalism. I was a broadcast journalist, went to school for that, but knowing the whole time that I wanted to focus my journalistic career, hopefully on something related to gastronomy. So shortly after I graduated from my journalism program, I went to Paris and did a culinary program there. When I came back, I was fortunate enough to do some food writing, but living in a small town on an island, there wasn't a huge amount of work in that area. There's some great restaurants, but they're few and far between where I live. And so I ended up just expanding back into broadcasting. I worked as a TV reporter on the radio as well, actually, and just did lots of kind of, aside from the regular journalistic grind, I did a lot of kind of media consulting and side work in that realm. But gradually, as so many of us in this industry, my health started to wane. Very significantly, actually. The journalism world is very demanding, very hard on the body, and it just wasn't nourishing my soul. So I think my body really started to reflect in that realm. So I actually ended up just quitting. I took a leave. I lived off my savings for a while, did a lot of soul searching, and through some great conversations with really important people in my life, realized that nutrition was the next step for me. I had already started really profoundly healing my body with nourishing, nutrient-dense whole foods, and decided to explore that further, whether that was for a career change or just for my own personal education. And that's what led me to become an NTP.
I love it. So yeah, as you can see, stories are always very similar. When you talk to nutritionists, most of the time they have gone in to solve one of their own health problems,
right,
and then have been able or fortunate enough to help others in the process, which I think is really cool. So your focus now is all about, you focus a lot on like cooking classes and education and workshops. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Coming back to kind of the journalistic background, I went into journalism because I love storytelling. I love narrative. I loved educating and informing people. But what I experienced in the industry was just the opposite. There's not a lot of opportunity to really help people learn. It's about giving people headlines and creating fear and feeding them what they think they should be doing, as opposed to truly getting to the root cause of it and helping them really understand the why. So with that said, a big part of what I do now is education, is getting people to understand the why, to understand the how, to actually implement the information they're learning. And that's where the cooking classes and the workshops come in. I do lots of one-on-one consulting, of course. It's a very important way to make sustainable change in people's lives. But I also like that I'm able to give them a whole spectrum of services, depending on where they're at, what makes sense for them at that moment in their life. And I find that really inspiring for me and really empowering for others, And it all kind of comes back full circle with my core passions and interests.
Ellie, what does whole happy mean to you? Because obviously I saw that on the website, but I'm curious of like, where did that come from? What was your inspiration?
I think maybe kind of playing off of what I just said, there's so much disjointed information in the health world. Things are really pared down to their pieces. And what I really was hoping to accomplish with this next phase in my career and my own wellness journey was really helping people understand what it truly means to feel healthy, what it means to have a happy body. It's not just about, clearing your skin. That's important if that's a goal for you. It's not just about, losing that excess adipose tissue. That's important, once again, if that's a goal for you. But it's about feeling your optimal vital self from the tips of your toes to the top of your head. It's inside and out. It's not just surface level. It's not just bits and pieces. And I think that name and that essence encompasses that.
I love that you called it excess adipose tissue. What a wonderful reframe. Is that some of the language that you use with your clients to help them overcome their fear of food or to help repair their relationship with their bodies?
Absolutely. I know I'm probably sounding like we're a broken record, but coming back to kind of like my journalistic career, being a writer, being very focused on word choice, I try to still be very focused on word choice. I try to really avoid the phrase weight loss. I mean, you guys know this, so many people know this, associations of losing or vulnerability can be really complicated when you're helping people achieve those goals. So I try to reframe a lot of my words. I try to keep them pretty positive, try to keep them pretty or neutral. I think I try not to create a whole other sense of damage just based on my sentence structure, because that can get really, really harmful, really challenging really quickly.
Definitely. You've got to be careful of like triggering language, whether it's positive or negative. We don't know how the other person will perceive it. So that's really important to be sensitive. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you teach clients to become, you call it making friends with food or overcoming fear of food? What are some of the top things that you teach clients? Is it more so, do you teach them how to listen to their bodies? Tell us a little bit about how you work one-on-one or in group settings around this subject.
Absolutely. First and foremost, it's about body intuition. Our bodies are so crazy smart. I mean, we are a very successful species. We have persevered through like countless trials and tribulations. We like should not, for all intents and purposes, be here. But
we're like cockroaches.
Right? Cockroaches that do more damage to the earth.
Right, that's right. Seriously.
But that's another conversation for another time. But still, I mean, in a joyous way, we are really, really successful, and we have this incredibly strong survival mechanism deep, deep, deep within us that even as much as we explore it scientifically, we're only scratching the surface. So knowing that, I really, truly believe that our bodies know best. They're constantly trying to give us information, signs. We call these symptoms, right? We think of them as pesky symptoms, things that we want to eradicate. But I truly believe this is your body just doing its best to communicate to you, telling you what it needs. And sometimes when we don't listen, those symptoms become worse and worse. And sometimes they actually seemingly go away and become more internal. And that's where I think you see a lot of manifestation of chronic disease. So, teaching people to create those communication pathways with the messages that their body is giving them is so, so key. But also at the same time, that kind of language, that kind of approach can be really scary for some people if they're not inherently intuitive, if those concepts are foreign to them. So sometimes just getting somebody to cut up some vegetables, sometimes just getting somebody to, try a new flavor that they've never even considered before, that's their gateway. So I kind of work on both those spectrums. I really encourage the body intuition, but then I also really try to help people with creating that stepwise process of having fun with food. Food's not the enemy. I mean, I really don't think that there's no bad foods. There's bad toxins, there's bad garbage, and sometimes that's disguised as food. But, there are certain foods that are great for some bodies and not so great for other bodies at that moment in time. But there's no bad food. If it's true, real food, then we need to learn to embrace that and have fun with that and not take it so seriously. Yes, there's a time and a place for a protocol, and that should be guided by an experienced or trusted healthcare practitioner. But I think people sometimes get really, really downtrodden and really over consumed with food and what it's doing to their bodies, when really we should just have fun with it. I can't tell you how many times in my cooking classes people ask me questions about, if they're freaking out, am I supposed to cut it this way? Oh, this meat has been sitting out for 5 minutes. I'm like, chill. It's fine. Your body can handle it. It doesn't matter if you julienne the carrots properly. It's still going to taste the same. And I think that's where my cooking classes differ a little bit from some other chefs, is that, oh man, like there's barely ever a recipe. I just get people to try it, to throw in a spice they've never worked with before, to eat something raw they've never eaten before, to touch food in ways that, might be uncomfortable for them at first. A lot of people have a hard time touching ground meat, for example. I'm like, just get your hands in there.
It sounds messy and imperfect, but I feel like exactly how we should really be approaching our health. Like you talked a little bit about people thinking that they need to do things perfectly. And we always talk in here about, like, everyone just needs to chill out and, like, uncomplicate. Like, everything's become so complicated out there. And if you just got back to, like, your more simplest, truest form, that's where really the answers lie. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And this is part of a lifelong project from a self-proclaimed perfectionist. I really struggle with that myself in my whole life and throughout my whole life. And I think working with others and actually articulating that to them has been really helpful for me. I mean, our bodies aren't perfect. That's the beauty of our bodies. Our health isn't perfect. That's the beauty of our homeostasis. It's a constant ebb and flow. I think there's the word balance used a lot in the healthcare world and things like that. And that's a great word. But sometimes I think when we focus too much on balance, we forget the word flow. And I think health, food, our approach to our wellness should be that flow. Sometimes it's going to have highs and sometimes it's going to have lows, and it's all part of our resilience. It's all part of our body's ability to grow and to sustain itself.
I love that. I love the idea of focusing on the word flow intermittently between the word balance. I think that's a beautiful term. I just wrote it down. Can you talk a little bit about how you have achieved balance and flow in your life? Because I know personally, like I watch your Instagram stories, you schedule out a lot of what we call like self-care rituals or practices. I had just noticed recently you had put that you schedule in 2 hours of movement per day, which to some would be like, oh my gosh, how does she have the time? But what I gathered is that it's a non-negotiable in your life. So can you talk a little bit about how you have prioritized your self-care or your rituals or practices or whatever language you want to use?
I'm so happy you brought that up. I got so many messages when I mentioned that on my social media that I do 2 hours of mindful movement a day. People were like, oh, that's a nice life. Do you work? And I'm like, yes, I work a lot. But pardon, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, in order to work a lot, you need the 2 hours. So
exactly. And you mentioned it before. It's a non-negotiable for me. It's a priority. And also, I think people get really caught up, kind of coming back to what we were talking about before, in the intensity of it. When I talk about 2 hours of mindful movement, I'm not necessarily talking about 2 hours grinding out of the gym. That's exhausting and not very sustainable for the majority of the population. I'm talking about getting up when you realize you've been working for 3 hours straight and doing some air squats, or wrestling around with your dog if you are fortunate enough to work at home, or just going for a walk around the block. Doing some, arm movements and breathing techniques. This is movement. You're moving your lungs when you breathe. I mean, that's mindful movement right there. But yes, sorry, going on a tangent about the movement, just because it's like, I got so much backlash.
I had a feeling that would happen because everyone sits from their other side and like, oh, must be nice. Like that's the comments when they don't realize what you're, sacrificing or giving up or compromising or what that means for you personally.
Absolutely. I also, while I create a lot of space for, nourishing rituals, I also put up a lot of boundaries for things that I don't feel are serving me. I don't watch TV. I mean, I do sometimes. I'm a human, but very rarely. I mean, I don't actually play around on social media that much. I use it for work and to keep in touch with awesome, rad other practitioners that I adore. But I really do create boundaries for myself. I give myself a lot of, you know, flowing structure, I should say. I shouldn't just say structure. I have a very flexible schedule. I like to really read how I feel in the morning and go with that. But yeah, I mean, I really just actually coming back to the morning, I start every day with rituals. I usually do some kind of beverage ritual, whether it's, I do this morning mindful matcha mantra thing where I whisk my intentions for the day into my matcha. Not everybody needs to drink matcha to do that. I mean, you can really just sit for 1 minute and think about how you want your day to unfold. And let me tell you, that is the most powerful practice I've implemented, is just stopping in the morning when so many lives are, that's the craziest part of the day. People are rushing around, shoving food in their mouth, slamming back coffee. How do we think that's going to set up the rest of our day if the first moments of our existence and that brand new day when we've, reawakened our body from slumber is in chaos? I have a feeling that chaos is only going to cascade throughout the rest of your day and even into your sleep. So I really do try to create a really, really intentional space in the morning, and then pockets of intention throughout the day. I mean, I try to do everything with intention, of course. That's the whole meaning of mindful living. But if I've been noticing that I have been not like really present, I've been working really hard on my computer, like editing photos or something, I do get up, I do create some space for those practices that keep me going. And that's how I'm able to work really long hours and work every day. I mean, I don't really take days off. Don't tell my clients that.
I'm sure your 2-hour break is totally enough downtime to recover from a 7-day work week.
That's the thing, though. It's like I've never, even since I was a little kid, really bought the idea that everybody has to do the same thing all the time. Why do we have to work a 40-hour work week and live for the weekend? I've never thrived in that environment. I love my work. It's so important to me. But I do it every single day. And because of that, I create these moments of self-care, whether it's walking in the woods or doing some meditation, a workout, yoga, my funny mindful matcha practices. These are how I create those weekends, that feeling of the weekend throughout my day, every single day. And I find it, for me at least, and everybody's different, it's so sustainable. Like, people are always telling me that they think I'm crazy because I've got so much energy.
So Ellie, with that being said, I totally recognize that right off the bat, that you've just got like this spirit, this energy about you, positivity. So I'm really curious, like when you get into a consultation, let's say with a client, and let's say they're not in a good space. Let's say they're not feeling good about themselves. They're frustrated. Maybe, you guys talked about weight, but many times, and you guys sort of, want to make that less of an issue, but many times people come in and that's their issue, or they perceive it as their issue. They're disconnected from their body. They're not listening to the cues, the communication that you've talked about. How do you take somebody from that space, which unfortunately, sometimes that's some of our listeners, flip that around and get them to a place where you feel like you've got them more living in the way that you live, which I love. Rachel, you talked about imperfection. And I've been told by many of my mentors that happiness is in the imbalance. It's not a 40-hour work week. It's not eating at 7 a.m., 12 p.m., and 6 p.m. It's all the everything else that you go and you sort of subscribe to that's different from what everyone else is doing. Talk to me about like going from a sad client, an angry client, to where you are right now. Like, what's that look like? How do you take somebody through that? I know that's a lot of questions all in one, but just kind of give me like a ballpark on that.
No, that's great. I mean, I go all over the place anyways. I don't think I've directly answered any of your questions so far, so great. That's my style. I think first and foremost, I honor that and I respect that. I honor where the client's at and I respect where the client's at. I'm a big, big believer that everybody is just doing the best they can with the tools they have in the situation they're in. So when you meet a client for the first time and they are eating really toxic foods, and they're not honoring their bodies, and they're totally disconnected, and maybe their wellness goals are a little bit problematic, I don't judge that. That is, first and foremost, they're there. They have made that conscious decision to reach out to me, to be in my office. They're carving out that hour in their day. That to me is bigger than anything else we'll accomplish the rest of our time together. And I really, really try to focus on that and honor that and just listen. I think most people in this world don't get an opportunity to have somebody just listen to them and truly listen. So that's really how we begin. I just say, why are you here? And sometimes people say, I don't know. Sometimes they say, oh, my, wife forced me to be here. My kids got me this as a gift certificate. I don't really want to be here. And that's still great. That's really important information for me. And I just get a sense of where they're at, what's important to them, what would make sense in their frame of reference in terms of taking those next steps. And just like every single body is different, every single client interaction I have is different. Yes, I have some incredible guidelines that I work through, and the program I did was great at helping practitioners figure out what a good plan of action would be. But every single client is different. I approach every client very, very differently. Some people want to dive right in. They want, a 4-week protocol. They want something with a lot of guidelines and structure. And some people really just, in some ways, want you to tell them that you think they're doing a great job and they're doing the best they can. And here are some gentle things they can try. Because sometimes the little things really do grow into some huge, huge change. I think that was just one of your questions.
Yeah, no, Ellie, that was perfect. I mean, the reason why I'm asking that question is because, number one, I think you're somebody who lives that, which I think is huge. It's authentic to you. But then more importantly, Align Lifers, if you're listening to this, what I'm looking for you to do is take the information that she's given you and then be able to apply it to your own life. Meaning, if you have children and they come home and let's say they have a problem from school, number one, meet them where they are, which means like understand their world. Maybe they had a tough day. Maybe they got picked on. Maybe they were bullied. Maybe they got into an argument or, somebody took their toy. I mean, but instead of the simple part of parenting, which is just sort of like guiding them and giving them background, it's more about empathizing with where they are, which is what I think you and Rachel do a great job with, Ellie. So guys, apply this to your life and see how it will change your relationships. Can't you see how using these strategies will deepen your relationships and give you more authenticity in your life so that when things do get hard, like we've talked about flow, you'll have a support system to fall back on, people who know you at a deep level and can then be able to assist you in a way that's actually going to be great advice versus just someone who sort of knows you from the side and is very surface level and is like, I kind of think you might do something like this. That's not good. That's not going to be enough to make a big change in your life. So I'm asking these questions to kind of lead you into strategies that they can then take and use that.
Absolutely. That's great.
Well said, Dr. Shea. I love it.
Thank you.
I love the whole idea of like meeting a client where they're at, and you oftentimes when you are working one-on-one or even group settings, I think the most meaningful relationship or the connection comes when it becomes less about the food and more about the relationship. And that's where you'll see that remarkable change, is because you've built a trusting relationship. You have that rapport. That client knows that you have their best interests at heart, that you're not just trying to take their money or give them a one-size-fits-all approach. It's just like that's where true change and flow and all these words that we've used comes, is in that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Creating a trust system is key. And I really do try to not be completely, sunshiny and rainbowy all the time. I think that can also create a lot of fear for people. They think, oh, wow, is that how I'm supposed to be? Is that even authentic? Is that what she's really like? I'm going to say first and foremost, every single thing you see on my social media is very authentic, sometimes too much. I'm a bit of a sailor mouth. But, I honor, being happy all the time. I should say being happy all the time isn't the answer. And I think I've actually struggled with the fact that happy is in my business name, but I don't mean it from a sense that you have to be smiling. You have to be, sparkling all the time. Happiness can sometimes be, in a weird way, sitting alone on a couch with a cup of tea and just saying, I'm not talking to anybody today. Like that can be a form of that internal, that whole happiness that has those flows, has those, ups and downs, has that balance. It's not about being perfect. It's not about having a perfect diet, perfect exercise routine. It's about listening to your body, and sometimes your body wants rest. Sometimes your body wants things that maybe, a news article you read is telling you shouldn't eat. Obviously, it's very important to learn how to decipher between, cravings from a potentially damaging standpoint and cravings or needs from a body intuition standpoint. But that, that's what a big part of what I work on with clients is deciphering between the two.
It's funny that you mentioned that sometimes you struggle with the word happy in your name, which I would never even think of that. Like, it's just an interesting observation. But when I'm listening to you, it sounds like sometimes happiness is just simply like creating the space for it to be what it is, kind of like an acceptance mode, or I don't want to use the word contentment, but maybe because contentment seems negative, but it really doesn't have to be. It just seems like it just is what it is. It's not good or bad, it just is what it is, and that's okay. And I think people think that if they're simply okay, then there must be something wrong.
Right. Yeah, I see that all the time for people. I think that's true. Ellie, switching gears, if you were to, like right now, I'm really curious of if there's some action steps that our listeners could take that would help them enjoy working with food more, have more fun, experience more mindfulness when doing food prep and meal prep. Is there any action steps that you could think of that you have enjoyed or that you've experienced that you recommend to your clients that you could pass along to our folks?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, figure out what your barriers are and then try to just say, okay, never mind. For example, that was kind of vague. For example, let's say somebody's like, I hate chopping vegetables. I really don't like it. I hate peeling them and cutting into these shapes that chef is telling me. If that's a barrier for you, don't peel it. Just chop it into like really thick, chunky shapes. If Jamie Oliver has taught us anything, is the thicker and chunkier the shape, the better. He's all about that. But really, like if that's a barrier for you to make vegetable-rich food, then just don't. Maybe eventually you'll, find a bit more finesse in your meal prep. But hey, au crudo is a really important aspect of the culinary world as well. Or, for example, let's say one of your barriers is you find that you don't like cooking alone. You feel like really bored when you're doing it. Listen to a podcast, invite some friends over, do a meal prep party. I know that sounds so dorky, but it actually is really fun. There's so many ways that we can overcome our boundaries and our barriers just by thinking a little bit outside the box and not being so fixated on the perfection of it. I think another really important thing for people to do, though, is to just educate themselves, understand the food system a bit more. Go visit a farmer's market, talk to the person that has the stand, ask them where the food comes from. I think when people appreciate and understand food more, they're more curious about it. They want to engage in it more. And it's less fearful that way. They really can get a better perspective that this is something that has come from the earth and is there to nourish their bodies, not some strange packaged, foreign object that is intangible or inaccessible to them.
That becomes just a way more personal experience. And what we know about eating and food is that it's extremely personal. It's not like optional. We can't just not have food. And so being connected with your food and knowing where it comes from and having that knowledge and education allows you to feel how it feels in your body, which then further connects you to your body and that wisdom. So I love that idea.
Have you guys ever read the book Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan?
That was a requirement reading for our class.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I love your class. So, guys, if you haven't read this book, number one, pick it up because it's a total game changer. Actually, it totally changed the way that I perceived how food was created, implemented, and why we eat what we eat these days, and what things are ruling the food world, which is really, really interesting. But at the end of the book, he talks about a meal that he's gone through and actually either created, farmed, planted, gathered, whatever it is. And he goes from start to finish, makes it, and then he eats it. You guys have talked a lot about mindful eating. I think that's like the perfect example of it. And what's funny is if you go back, not even like 100, maybe 200 years at most, that is life as a human being on this planet, as a Paleolithic hunter-gatherer. That's what you did. So when you go out and you do a little bit of hunting and gathering, like at a farmer's market, and you get in touch with the food, and then you bring it back home and you know where it comes from, that is getting in touch with it. That is mindful eating. That is a way for you to be able to connect with the nutrients that are nourishing your body and making it whole and happy. That's exactly what we're looking for. So again, take a little bit more effort. Slow down, be deliberate, go and be intentional, and then make it something that you can then incorporate into your weekly routine. I've never heard of doing a meal prep party.
Oh, we should have one.
Dude, I think that sounds super legit. I think it would be really fun. I'm already thinking of like what people I can invite over, what kind of meal, like how we can work out the money, like any suggestions on that? So like if you have 5 people over, does one person per week pay for the whole deal and then you switch, or how does this work? Like what's the suggestion on this?
I think when I've seen this done in the past, I mean, I love cooking on my own. So I'm going to say right here, I like to meal prep party solo, but
Party for one.
Party for one. Actually, it's me and my dog, just the two of us. He's a really good helper. So often people will just split the bill however many ways. Like they'll maybe
That
one
makes more
person
sense.
will do the grocery shopping for that week and then they'll just split the bill. But what I love about it is same thing. If your barrier is cooking with, I don't know, fish, maybe you're like, ugh, I really like to eat it, but like just touching it makes me feel weird. That maybe that's not what you cook that week. Maybe you have one of your, meal prep party pals do the fish and you're really good at prepping, I don't know, asparagus. You're the asparagus person that day. So you can kind of divide and conquer and then also learn from each other and be motivated by other people's skills.
Yeah, it's like an accountability system that's built in. Funny story about fish. First time my wife ever tried to make salmon for me. By the way, my wife previously was a vegetarian. She went and bought salmon from the store, laid it out, flipped it over. Well, you know what's on the backside of that thing. She literally chucked it up into the air, threw it, and like screamed and ran out of it. It was so friggin' funny. So anyways, so yeah, I can understand how
But
that
now,
could
can
be
she
a
cook it?
barrier.
Can she cook it now?
Yeah, she's legit.
She's
She's a
come a
very
long
good cook.
way.
She has. I
What
love you, babe.
what I've seen at meal prep parties is like each person's responsible for coming up with a different meal. So they shop for that. And so say there's 3 people at this meal prep party. Each person's responsible for a meal. They bring all the supplies. Everyone brings their Tupperware. And either the food is prepared for that week or it's like frozen into freezer bags and it can be ready for like the crock pot. I've seen that happen and I've had a couple of clients do that. And I love that idea because there's like meals for the next 2 weeks. Like you're set.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's great. And you create that camaraderie, that community essence, so many things that are lost in our relationship with food. And I hear so much, I mean, obviously we all do, we hear this from our clients and our patients so often, is that, cooking and eating even is a chore. It's something they don't have time for. And I think you guys have really importantly said that this is a non-negotiable. This is something we have to do. We have to eat. And furthermore, we have to eat nourishing foods. This is what our body runs on. But I really do like to encourage people that, try not to look at it as a chore. Try to look at it as a fun activity to do with friends or family. Try to look at it as a place of exploration in your life. Maybe instead of going to, I don't know, a pub on a Sunday afternoon with your friends, cool, that's awesome, no judgment there. But maybe you do instead go with those friends to a farmer's market and make something a little bit more engaging that way. I think that if we stop looking at food and grocery shopping and cooking as a burden in our life and look at it as literally what fuels our life, I think just working on that perspective shift, not only is that going to make it more enjoyable, not only are you going to find more space and time for it, but I truly believe the food will nourish your body better when you have a different perspective and relationship with that food on a cellular, physiological level. I think when we're disconnected and disengaged with our food, I don't think it serves us as well.
I couldn't agree with that more. I never understood the people that are like, I just wish I had an IV that could inject me with all of my nutrients for the day. I'm like, what? You're like missing out on so much in life. Okay, well, wrapping up a bit, you mentioned on your earlier that on your Instagram you do these morning matcha mantras. That is a tough one to say. Which I definitely recommend everyone go check out. Her Instagram handle is Ellie Shortt with 2 T's, and I'll link it into the show notes. That's correct, right?
Yeah.
And if you're looking for the most beautiful Instagram stories of your life, you need to check these out because they're so colorful and thoughtful and well curated and meaningful and impactful. Like if you don't know where to start, I definitely recommend that you start by checking out her Instagram and checking out these mantras, because I can't help but feel centered and happy when I read through those each day. Also recognizing that the creativity and the effort behind them, I applaud you.
Thank you.
But will you tell people a little bit more about what you're up to these days and where else they can find you? I know we mentioned it briefly, and any final words for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Instagram is probably my main channel of interaction and communication with my audience. I sadly don't have any, email lists or anything set up at the moment, but Instagram is a big one. I do have a Facebook page as well, which is just, I think, Whole Happy Nutrition. I love how I don't even know what it is. But, I do love to work with people that aren't necessarily in my city. So if people do want to chat further about it doesn't have to be nutritional therapy. It can be about food, cooking, even, I don't know, the problems with how food is discussed in journalistic system and the media system. I'm happy to chat with anybody, whether they're local or from afar.
I love it.
Right on.
Any last questions?
No, you're kicking ass, Ellie. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much for coming on the Align Life podcast. And Align Lifers will look forward to speaking with you next week. Have a great week.
Bye.